After the events of the loop, things went back to normal for the rest of the Steves. They went on to have their own adventures and grow as a society. This is Rainbow Quest Aftermath, the final episode, part 8 of the 8-part series. Light walked out of the colorless outpost at the Yellow Kingdom just as the sun began to rise in the early morning. He watched the sun rise with an anticipation for a continued bright future for him and the rest of the kingdoms and the Steves that lived in them. It had been a few months since the first curse was defeated, and since Sabre and Time had disappeared, even though it had been so long since they'd left, he still missed the two of them dearly every single day and wished to see the two of them again. Every night as he went to sleep, he would relive the day the first curse was defeated and relive the events of that day, whether they were presented through a horrible nightmare or a peaceful dream. He glanced up at the brightness of the skies above him and sighed to himself, then turned and walked back inside. He stepped back inside the outpost and quickly grabbed a shield and spear off the wall. Light had scheduled a meeting with Happy, who was staying at the Orange Kingdom for a brief time, as he was both visiting the kingdom and discussing important matters with the Orange leader. He said goodbye to the other guards who were just waking up, then left the outpost and teleported to the Orange Kingdom. Happy stepped outside the house he was staying in and glanced at the sky, noting that it was almost time for Light to arrive at the kingdom. He sighed to himself and started to take a short walk around his former home. Even as he walked around the place, he couldn't believe that this place, his home, wasn't where he fully resided anymore. Of course, he would still visit every few weeks, but ever since he became a colorless guard, the duties kept him incredibly busy. Light was tough on them, at least when he first joined, but Happy knew that he wasn't as strict as he was with him compared to others. He appreciated it, but he knew it wasn't fair to the other trainees if he was being favored. So he asked Light to be as strict as he was with the others to him. He learned much faster from then on, and because of that, he'd been able to go on different missions, like when the ghouls were an issue. He was able to handle it. After a few weeks of being a guard, Light granted him the rank of one of his elites. Happy smiled quietly to himself and lifted his gaze to the sun. Then, a split second later, lightning boomed in the gazebo, and Happy made his way over. Light greeted Happy cheerfully, and the two exchanged pleasantries, then made their way over to where Happy was staying, so they could have privacy for what they would be discussing. Once they were inside, Happy asked what Light wanted to speak to him about, as he had been gone for a few days and wasn't fully caught up on the current plans. Light told him about the future plans he had discussed with the other elite members. They were planning to create an official headquarters for the Colorless Guard. With the outposts scattered around the kingdoms being efficient, they didn't have an official base of operations, and it had started becoming more of a prominent issue with some of the threats that arose in the past few months. Happy reacted happily and agreed to the proposal almost immediately, and suggested for efficiency's sake, they could incorporate a feature in the Rainbow Hub where there could be separate portals to each kingdom or dimension, vice versa. Light agreed, and explained that he had already planned on contacting Violet Leader to oversee the construction with him, as they had done so during the time of the Rainbow Kingdom. The two of them spoke about the plan for the headquarters for a little while longer. Then Light noted that the two of them should return to the Yellow Kingdom to propose the idea to the other elites, then get in contact with the two leaders. Happy agreed, and the two walked out of the house and teleported back to the kingdom. The two of them were able to meet up with the other elites, who were resting in the outpost, and once they went over the proposal Happy had, they all agreed and gathered some guards to begin searching for a suitable location for the headquarters. Happy traveled back to the Orange Kingdom to ask the Orange Leader for some designers to start on the design of the building itself. And some other guards went to the Yellow Leader to ask for some Yellow Steves to start gathering materials and aid them in searching for a location. Light, on the other hand, told the guards that he would meet them later, as he had planned to talk with the Violet and Indigo leaders. Light walked up to the Violet Leader's house and knocked on the door, with the Violet Leader answering it shortly and welcoming him inside. He told the leader about their plans for the headquarters and asked for his assistance in overseeing the construction. The Violet Leader happily agreed and expressed his joy in being able to be a part of some major project. Light smiled and quickly asked Violet to contact the Indigo Leader, since he also needed to speak with him. Violet Leader explained that the Indigo Leader was out at the moment, and before he'd left, he had explained that he was working on a project for the Middle World. Light was a little disappointed, but thanked the Violet Leader nonetheless, and teleported back to the Yellow Kingdom. As expected, progress on finding a well-suited environment was difficult. From the plan, Light had proposed for the headquarters to not only be well-fortified structurally, but it also had to be able to be defended easily. One of the days that they were traveling, the Indigo Leader had teleported to Light's location. He was overjoyed, as he had been getting slightly concerned about the lack of communication between him and the Indigo Leader. Thankfully, they were able to set up an agreement and progress on finding the location of the headquarters. After a few days, one of the groups of guards were able to find the perfect location, and once it was approved by Light, construction began. In a couple of days, with the help of a few orange and yellow Steves, the basic structure was being worked on and nearing its completion. And in a matter of a week, it was almost complete. And all they were missing were the portals, which were able to be completed in no time, with Indigo along with Violet Leader overseeing the construction. Then, just like that, the headquarters were finished. And as Light looked up at the finished building, he was in awe of the progress they had made in such a short amount of time. Once it was completed, he thanked Indigo and Violet Leader for their help. The two leaders told Light it was no problem and returned to their kingdom and dimension. Light looked back up at the building and smiled, then walked inside. The structure was built expertly. Even with a short time span between the beginning of the construction and the end, Light was greeted by one of the Orange Steves who had offered to give him a small tour of the headquarters once it was completed. The Orange Steve led him through the corridors and showed him his own room and office, a room for the armor and weapons, the colorless guard, a meeting room, and finally, the portal room. This was the room Light was most excited about. He remembered how Rainbow Steve and Sabre traveled between kingdoms with ease. There was a portal to every major kingdom, the red, orange, yellow, and green kingdoms, a waypoint to where blue Steves could go if trouble arose, the new Indigo Tower, and lastly, the Violet Kingdom. Light thanked Orange Steve for the tour and for helping with the construction. Shortly after, he returned to his kingdom using the orange portal. Light smiled and began to walk out of the hallway before glancing back and then walked out of the room. In the weeks that followed, the colorless guard were able to move into the headquarters, and the guard's duties remained the same. But now it was much easier to travel from kingdom to kingdom. Light was happy, knowing that he had accomplished so much for not only himself, but for all of the other kingdoms as well. All he could hope was that if Sabre and Time were still there, they would feel the same. From then on, he traveled from kingdom to kingdom on a daily basis, speaking with some friends from all of the kingdoms. A few more months passed. The kingdoms continued to thrive. The Steves were flourishing, and their world was finally at peace. Light Steve continued to train the guards, go to meetings, and at one specific meeting, none of them had any issues to discuss. The Orange Leader proposed they all treat this like a normal conversation between friends, and not like a conversation between leaders. They all agreed, and the 7 of them spoke about not-so-trivial matters until the sun was setting. At the very end, Light mentioned how he wished Sabre could see everything they had done, to be there and see them friends again, simply enjoying each other's presence. The room went silent, and all the leaders apart from the Red Leader and Light shared a glance and smiled sadly to themselves. The Green Leader agreed and glanced up at the banner that hung on the wall behind them. A moment passed in the building. Then, Orange Leader proposed quietly that they all visit the memorial, since the 7 of them had never gone together as a group. The 7 of them agreed and teleported to the memorial. They arrived just as the sun was setting on the banner and statue. One at a time, the leaders walked up and placed a respective flower of choice at the bottom of the pedestal. As they looked up at the banner, Light could only hope that what they had all done would make Sabre and all the other heroes proud. Stories come to a close, chapters end, but the legacies of the people and the heroes of those stories will always be remembered. Their journeys will continue to be in the hearts of the people who remembered them most until the end of time. With the official colorless headquarters being established and the leaders paying final respects to the hero that allowed their story to continue, that concludes Rainbow Quest Aftermath, the final episode. Thank you all for joining me on this journey, this story, not just in Aftermath, but all of it. I mean it when I say that this story has done a lot, and it means the world to me to know that it's reached many hearts. A story with a real conclusion, a story with a real end. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this, or were at least entertained a little by it. As always, I'm Sabre, and I'll see you later.